Hey guys, Thomas the Silly Jr. here, aka Mustached. I'm here to review the movie Dune. If you end up enjoying this review, then please consider joining my Patreon page. There'll be the second link in the description. Also consider doing all the other stuff like liking, commenting, and subscribing. All shilling will be repeated by the end of the review. With initial shilling out of the way, let's talk about the movie Dune. Alrighty. So, Dune is apparently based off of a book. So this is a book adaptation that is going to be done in however many parts, which apparently part 2 has already been confirmed by the time I'm making this review. And I have not read the initial story, so I went into this movie pretty much hearing some people talk about it, essentially, and got pretty fascinated about what this movie was going to be all about. And after watching it, well, here we are. So, this review will be as objective as possible. And obviously, since I don't know the source material in a way that sort of helps me, in not doing the consistent comparison to, oh, well, it's not like the book argument, or it's not like the video game argument, or whatever. Here, I could just say what I did or did not like about the movie, and back it up with, details that would either make it a good movie or a bad movie. So, here we are. And the movie starts off in some sort of dialect that is being spoken to the audience in some otherworldly language. And we see the beginnings of our Emperor group, and we see one Dave Bautista playing the Emperor's, I guess, right hand, or he's also like related to the Emperor, named Rabba, I believe his name is. And we cut to our lead character in the year 10,191, I believe it is what I wrote anyways. I could be wrong about that, but minor detail. His name is Paul, and he will be our protagonist for all intents and purposes. And I will just get it out of the way now. I don't think that he's a very engaging protagonist. And I don't. And again, since I haven't read the book, I can't really say, what his character is supposed to be or whatever. But here, I just found what we do get of him in this, it isn't quite enough. In fact, I think they sprung a bit too far ahead, which I find a bit odd, considering with this being a part one, and more importantly, a setup to the whole big action set pieces or whatever part 2 and 3 are gonna consist of. I find it a bit odd that it felt like the movie just skips, this is his ability, and this is like the only piece of content of his character that we can chew on, as I'll get to later on. In terms of his powers, he seems to possess ability that is passed down from his mother, which gives him some sort of equivalent to mind tricking people into doing what he commands through this voice, but he's not successful at it quite yet. So his power goes through a bit of an arc. He has to perfect it, and the fact that we only see it here being trained on once, and then the next time we see it he is successful, that's it feels like it's barely anything. So we already have our issues here and there. And we learn through the world building that the spice, this thing called spice, which is on this Earth or planet, wherever they are, um, that it is their main source of pretty much everything. So it is the main source of what is being fought over. Um, it is. They even imply that they use it to send out their ships and so on and so forth. And sure, a little bit of interest in terms of world building, and I do think that um, again, as a consequence of our lack of characters, I do feel like the world building is a little bit wasted here, unfortunately. Um, and we meet our most interesting character, and I put that in quotes, named Duncan, played by Jason Momoa. Um, and interesting mentioning Dave Bautista and Jason Momoa is not even that long ago. I just reviewed the series C, which both of them are featured in season 2. So it's interesting to see them back to back in that way, and seeing Jason Momoa's continual ability to act up, and I'll say I do enjoy his acting a little bit more than, say, Dave Bautista's, just a little smidge more. I've been a little bit more convinced that Jason Momoa is definitely, he's got a lot going on, but this movie unfortunately doesn't do him too much favor. As we'll see, he sort of just plays the badass, or as badass as perceivable army guy, uh, that seems to at least have some respect for the enemies that we'll come to learn about. Um, anyways, as he makes his way onto the scene, Paul wants to talk about his dreams slash visions, and these things come in sequence throughout the film. Um, they're supposed to just be like, hey, this thing is going to happen later on, so it's like, whatever. Uh, then we cut to him with his father, and probably the most meaningful thing his father gets to do in the entire movie is talk about how just him being a son is just the most rewarding thing of all in their little exchange. Um, Thus, we cut to his training, which I do appreciate. We do get a character training and actually going through the process, showing that he can be outwitted by this other guy. So again, a little bit of a character arc through action. I actually do appreciate this little bit because, it's little details like that that do help movies like this stand out above other movies that I've seen recently that just lack that just anything going on. And the whole like the characters perfect from the get go kind of characters, which have been overrun in a lot of the movies I've been seeing. So it's a little refreshing to see someone actually training. Um, anyway, the trainer, I don't remember his name. He's some like older guy, but he implies that the people in their planet that they're being assigned to, the Iraqis, as Arrakis, I believe it's pronounced, the second one I said, is that they are not human, which I find bizarre. The only distinguishable feature, from what I can tell, is that these non-people, quote unquote, have blue eyes, and that seems to be really the only distinguishing feature that is different from them from people. They don't seem to display any powers, which I find fascinating considering our main character has powers. So I'm not sure why they're even considered non-human. I'm I'm gonna have to assume that that's way better established in the books. Um, is my best faith interpretation of that. Um, and moving right along, excuse me, we see that Rabba, uh, we cut back to him, and he's talking with his nephew about like how they could possibly fail or something along those lines. Meanwhile, we cut to back to Paul and his father. They made their way back, and the father awakes him, and he's like talking to him. And right after, the doctor then, his doctor that he visits, uh, warns him that something is a little off or something or other of that nature. He's then proceeded to be put into some sort of pain test, is the best way I can explain it. Is this basic box that he puts his hand in, and it seems to exhibit pain through whatever means. I'm not sure really what is happening in the box, but it is the most acting the actor gets to do in the entire movie. Um, so it's pretty safe to say that our main lead, is extremely bland, which is definitely a objective criticism that I think is very fair to make on this movie. And he is not the only one. Even as I mentioned, Duncan, even though just sort of the generic, like, sort of semi badass character moments, and definitely gonna go a lot more into him a little bit later on. But anyways, back to the narrative. As it's progressing, he seems to pass whatever test this is, and it seems to imply here that they're a little bit forlorn that they didn't have a daughter, because apparently only women can possess whatever thing that the mother has to the degree that she has. I'm assuming they're referring to the voice thing, even though he becomes successful at it to a degree later on. More so over, he's whispering to the mom, obviously, later on about, like, what's going on. And so he decides to head out, go on a little trip. And the group gets ready to leave for their ship. And they're making their way towards the planet. So they receive, as they're heading toward the new planet, they receive some fanfare. And we see that the father talks about accepting what the big dogs have lent them, this mission of potential failure, but he is not aware of what the whole bad guys are doing behind the scenes or whatever. So he seems to take it on with great responsibility. So yes. So, I wrote in my notes, a woman presents a knife. I believe this is to the mother that receives it, and she does some. I think she gives it or hides it or something. I don't exactly recall. My notes on that particular subject are a little bit vague, so I do apologize on that one. So the son being outside, just talking with some farmer about what this whole plan is going through. He's going through the tapes, so he's learning about what consists on this planet. So we get to learn through him the world building, how dangerous this world truly is. And thus a small bug enters the room, which means he's being spied on. and they learn about the bug hunters as we cut back to the throne after he destroys the little bug thing. Uh, and thus, after we cut to the throne, we get Paul's first meeting with his father in the in the seating of army stuff. Um, and this is where we see Duncan re-arrive. He seems to be younger here, which is bizarre. Um, and we meet a blue-eyed individual named Stigler, or Ajax, I believe her name was, or what they call her anyway. She preps their suits, just his, and she seems to note that Paul already adjusted his, which is a little catches her interest, considering. So, we cut to our ships, and they're trying to pick up one of these things that's picking up the salt. And one of the anchors proceeds not to hook on to what it's supposed to. So they're trying to get to the people off this thing as they see a incoming worm. So they know, and this we're talking about a giant monster worm that is going to devour this entire thing if they do not get the people out. They manage to do so. Paul barely makes it out as he sort of collapses and then is like having visions throughout it. All the while, when he's back, the mother gets him to check in with the doctor again. And he tells him about the visions, and he gets some more about this young woman, blue-eyed woman, who kisses him and then proceeds to stab him. So that just makes the visions very questionable as to what they're actually trying to present him with. At any rate, we cut back to our army planet, and we learn that they're going to be sitting in battalions, and we see that the mother talks with the father. They discuss about their son, and after their little talk, the attack on the base starts. This is the Empire being like, we're just gonna go in there and fuck you guys up. Giant bombings occur. A war breaks out. And I will say at this point, to me, the technology makes no fucking sense here. So, from what I gather, they have these shield things, and the shield things don't seem to really do anything extra for them. It's like it seems to just delay the killing strike, which doesn't really do anything extra. And I mean, like, people will get like hit, and then you'll see the stun turn from blue to red, and then they'll be like stunned, and then they'll just fall. So I really don't understand the point of the red armor, or the armor in general. And in fact, it leads to one of the worst deaths I've seen in I wouldn't say it's as bad as, say, The Last of Us 2's death, but it's pretty bad in terms of just the last moment is just really, it actually looks really shitty. And of course, I guess spoiler alert, it's Duncan. So yeah, Duncan, no surprise, as this war is breaking out, their team is getting fucked up. We see that the doctor is working for the bad guys. He thinks he's going to be safe because the big bad promised that he'd be able to see his wife. Presumably the wife's already dead, according to the Emperor, because he kills him too. And as I said, Duncan goes on the attack. and the son and mother are left to their own devices as they're trying to retreat further away. Um, and Duncan makes sure that they make it to their ship. Um, and again, this is where he falls, uh, and it looks terrible. He gets like hit, as I mentioned. It turns from the red to the to the blue to the red, and then he just sort of has this look expression like, and then he just sort of falls over. It looks terrible. It looks awful, and I don't understand why they did this. Um, and again, I'm not sure if there's a in-world book. Again, back to the book. I haven't read it, so I'm not sure what these armors do that's different. I would hope that they do more that they do in this movie, because they seem kind of pointless in the movie, again, as I mentioned. Uh, so yeah, as they're being taken away, the son tries to use the voice, as I call it in my notes, but this gives the mom ample opportunity to save them, so she does. They climb out, and so this is where we get some moments of. We also see the doc talking to the king after he gets taken down. Um, and we see again the doc being killed. Uh, and the father shooting up his acid stuff. So, like, the doctor had a contingency plan in case things went pretty bad, and they went pretty bad. So he did the thing. He sacrificed himself, but at what cost? So, Duncan, uh, in his last, his last moments or something or rather, tells Ajax about the attack that happens. And he's seeing, and I believe this is part of the visions or something, because it kind of rolls right into him seeing the girl again. And his eyes are blue, so I'm not sure what that implies quite yet. And then he proceeds to yell at his mother for some reason. I actually didn't write it what the exact reason was, so I just know that happens. Anyway, point being that they arrive, and Ajax brings them to the sand out post or whatever they call it, as more attacks are happening in these other areas. And this is, again, I mentioned it early, but this is where Duncan makes his last stand, as multiple men are coming in, and he's just trying to prevent as many of them getting to them as possible. But as they're sort of splitting apart, Ajax splits from the two of them, and Ajax is then persisted to be attacked as the other two manage to get away. And all the other people who are left behind get taken by the worm. So the two of them who are remaining are left in the sandstorm, and he is getting more visions about where he's going to be. And we cut back to the Emperor, who seems to be brought back by a black goop, is the best interpretation I can give of what I just saw. And thus we cut back to Paul and Mom living through a crash landing. Putting on the advanced suits, they get the compass and they proceed to move forward using the worm movements that the son learned. So he's taken into account the stuff he saw at the beginning. But it doesn't work forever, as they land on some sand that it just doesn't do quite the trick. So the worm is coming after them. And thus they get to a certain section where the son looks like he's about to be eaten, but the worm also seems to suddenly stop. And thus begins our final moment of this movie, where this group proceeds to move them elsewhere, are blue-eyed individuals, uh, and they seemingly stop this and they save the two of them. Um, and uh, they an attack occurs where the mom and son are like fighting a little bit, just trying to make sure they're okay. Um, and Paul meets the girl that we see in the visions at last, truly, for the first time, and they have their little moment. And then comes a confusing ending for me, because I heard that this ending was good. I think it fucking sucks, objectively speaking. Or it just makes no sense. And maybe I can be convinced otherwise, but so apparently the person who challenges Duncan makes no sense to me. Apparently is the very guy who just saved them, and he is apparently the one that does this challenge, and apparently it is a challenge to the death. There is no alternative to this, I guess. To me, this makes less sense than Wakanda rules, if I'm being completely bluntly honest. I mean, it just doesn't. There's like nothing here. It makes no sense to me why you would do this. Why you would save two of these people and then be like, nah, I'm gonna challenge them though, and I'm gonna do both of those things. It's like they don't. Those two things are in complete, separate from each other. They're in complete odds with one another. Um, so yeah, the son obviously wins. He gets the kill on this guy who, again, no sense to why he even challenged him. And Paul, making a reference to what his father said earlier in the movie, saying that he'll be using the sand power as the movie rolls along, as they walk on into the distance and the movie crawls to its credits. Um, so yeah, in terms of a score, uh, quite frankly, I think the highest I can give this movie is a 4 out of 10. And I know that seems surprisingly low, and I'm pretty sure there are other reviews. I've not seen any of them, but I assume people like this. Maybe, I don't know. And I'm just going off of everything I know, and that is that the characters that we see are flat. The world building has the most interesting elements. However, again, the sacrifice of those characters is what makes the cutoff so intangibly high on the score being removed of so many of its points, as well as among the terrible character work. The ending is just not that strong either. In fact, again, as I just mentioned, it's very confusing. And as an overall package, I do think that those issues with the characters, if your characters aren't interesting, and I think that this is something that we have to talk about time and time again as we review more and more movies, is that characters make everything. They are the foundation, and I think that this is a perfect movie to bring this up with. When you don't have interesting characters, it doesn't matter how interesting your world is if it's not surrounded by interesting characters to make a world feel lived in. That's why I always say characters first, or if I haven't said that before, I'm saying it now. And again, I think this movie is a perfect example of how not to do characters. These characters are just too flat. We don't get enough time with them, and for the time that we do get enough with them, we don't get enough material to say, well, this is their character, this is what their strengths are, what all of their weaknesses are. You know, and this is your overall investment grows as we learn about said character. Even the lead character struggles with that and meeting that on all those requirements, which again, since that seems to be consistent with all of the characters to a degree, it makes the overall story just not as compelling as it could be, because you're not as invested as with these characters if they're not compelling enough. Um, you may like, ooh, like, oh, this is a different world or whatever, but again, the people inhabiting said world just there isn't enough there, and I think when I reviewed my own book, objectively speaking, when I also gave it a 4 out of 10, since this is based off of a book, uh, one of the things I said, or maybe even implied, is that I did not know how to fully write all of my characters uh, in the initial standing of Syndicate X. But I think, in terms of squaring this off, I would say that Syndicate X has more interesting characters, but does also suffer from other characters just not being interesting enough. Um, and this, by comparison, I'm not sure. Like again, Duncan to me had the most potential to be a character, and it's like they flatlined him. It's like, why? Why did you do that to the character that had potentially the most potential to be engaging? Or maybe even the father. I feel like there's a lot you could have done with him, and you did do some things with the character, but then you kill him too. It's like, okay, so now you killed the two characters that had something going on, some potential, and you just kill them. It's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? If you're gonna kill the characters that you have the most invested in, or the characters you're gonna put the most work in, is like, well, what do you have left? You got nothing. You got all these blank cardboards that are just walking around all generic like, and you know, the son's journey, uh, it just doesn't feel compelling enough. I don't think just giving him the small minor details of like, oh, he's not good with powers at the beginning and then he's suddenly good. Like, there's a gap. There's already a gap there, and there shouldn't be a gap. And what is his personality? He's so bland and generic. I can't tell you what he's actually like as a person. That is, again, maybe something hopefully the second movie can fix, is actually making him a character. That'd be neat. But I don't think that's going to save this movie from being a 4 out of 10 or even a 3 out of 10. I feel like I can go even lower with the score, honestly. Um, just talking about it more and exploring just how bad this movie is, objectively speaking. And with that, I believe I will make that the end of this review. So if you ended up enjoying it, then please feel free to like, comment, and subscribe. Also make sure to check out those links in the description. One will head you over to my Discord server. The second will head you over to my Patreon page. Any donations are greatly appreciated, and until next time everyone, bye-bye.